Hello, greetings everyone. My name is Abhinav. I am the CHM officer of the CBD Secretariat, and along with my colleague Frederick Vogel, I welcome all of you in the first session of the webinar series on knowledge management for biodiversity, which is also abbreviated as KM4B. This webinar series builds upon the initial round of discussion on knowledge management that took place during COP15 in Montreal. The series aims to promote continuous exchange of knowledge, experience, and learning among key practitioners and stakeholders working towards implementation of goals and targets of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The theme for today's webinar is unlocking the power of knowledge to support the implementation of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Our first speaker today is Mr. Erie Tamale, Senior Program Officer from CBD Secretariat, who will address the topic Introduction of Knowledge Management under the Convention and the Protocol, Target 21 of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and the Knowledge Management for Biodiversity Initiative. Our second speaker today is Professor Andreas Brandner, Executive Director for Knowledge for Development Partnership, who will address the topic of leveraging knowledge management to support the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework's goals and targets and the Sustainable Development Goals. After the presentations, we will open the floor for questions for all of you. You can also post your questions in the chat channel, and we will address them sequentially. Please note that this session is being recorded through Zoom, and the recording will be made available to all the participants. We also invite you to visit the link https://km4b.cbd.int/webinars to know more about the schedule and the themes of the upcoming webinars. So with this, I hand over the floor to Mr. Erie Tamale for opening the series by introducing the topic and by speaking on behalf of the Executive Secretary.
Thank you very much, Abhinav, and good time of the day to all of you, and welcome to this first webinar, which will be part of the series of the Knowledge Management for Biodiversity series to be organized by the CBD Secretariat and our various partners. As you all know, the adoption of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was a momentous achievement. However, its real significance is still yet to come, and is entirely dependent on how quickly we can effectively translate the goals and targets into actions on the ground. Countries have now embarked on process of revising and aligning their NBSAPs, that's the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, with the Global Biodiversity Framework, including setting new targets and also defining concrete actions to contribute to the achievement of the GBF goals and targets. This will undoubtedly require transparent and timely access to relevant data, information, and knowledge. The lack of reliable biodiversity data and information has been noted in previous reports, and as well as regional and global assessments as an important obstacle, a key obstacle to the meaningful action on biodiversity. We need to rectify this. Quick and easy access to information will be key to monitoring the progress of implementation of the GBF. As I am sure you're all aware, a monitoring framework for the GBF containing a series of indicators was adopted by COP15 as part of the package during the adoption of the GBF. However, the indicators are only as good as the data and information behind them. Moreover, the monitoring framework that was adopted still has gaps that must be urgently filled. To do this, the COP has established an ad hoc technical expert group, and parties will review the monitoring framework and finish its development at COP16 next year. We are pleased to note that there's a growing number of parties and stakeholders who are already working to work towards implementation, full implementation of the GBF. Actually, our implementation, there's a lot of work going on right now We are delighted to be working with so many partners, including the Global Knowledge Support Service for Biodiversity, the NB-SAP Accelerator Partnership, and many others that are working with us, not only on the knowledge management, but also supporting implementation of the GBF in general. We would like to highlight that we are the Secretariat. We are here to support you in you as parties and also as partners and stakeholders in ensuring that this time around we'll successfully implement the global targets, the global goals and targets of the GBF. And this will be done, as you know, the GBF are committed to doing this through a whole of government, whole of society approach. And with this, we can work together to halt and reverse biodiversity loss. We hope that the first series of these webinars on knowledge management biodiversity will be part of this set of tools and efforts that will help you implement successfully implement the Global Biodiversity Framework. I would like to thank you again for joining this webinar and for signing up and joining in big numbers. And we look forward to sharing knowledge with you through this series. So that's a statement on behalf of the Executive Secretary. So I'll now take on my next role, I think, as a presenter for the first presentation. And just 1 minute, give me 1 minute. Thank you very much. And so I'm going to be talking to you about introducing knowledge management under the CBD and its protocols. As you know, right from the negotiation of the instrument itself, the parties recognize the importance of information, data, information, and knowledge, and many provisions of the convention. And also in the protocols, talk about the importance of sharing knowledge, sharing information, and sharing knowledge. Under Article 17 of the convention, parties are specifically encouraged, actually urged to share information. Under the Cartagena Protocol, same thing. We have an article that calls for sharing of information, including through the Biosafety Clearinghouse. That's I guess target Article 20. Same thing with the Article 14 of the Nagoya Protocol, also requiring parties to share information. Within the context of the protocols, as you know, this some of the information is mandatory. The information can only be shared through the clearinghouse as a recognized instrument through which to share the information. Under the convention, the sharing of information is been largely through the clearinghouse mechanism portal. So, but today we are talking about knowledge management in a broader sense, not just within the just information per se, but knowledge in general. And today, next slide. So today I'm going to take you through quickly the knowledge management management under in the context of the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and then talk about knowledge management, the knowledge management management initiative, the KM4B initiative itself, and then finally wrap up with an indication of where we'll be going in the coming month. So, within the context of the Global Biodiversity Framework, as you all know, we had a target specifically adopted by the parties on knowledge management. This is target 21. And target 21 calls for ensuring that the best available data, information, and knowledge are accessible to decision makers, practitioners, and the public. Why? In order to guide effective and equitable governance, integrated and participatory management of biodiversity, and also to strengthen communication, awareness raising, education, monitoring, research, and knowledge management. And all this being done in this, as also in this context, ensuring that traditional knowledge, innovations, practices, technologies of indigenous peoples and local communities are accessed with their free and the informed consent. So it's a bit mouthful, but the key words there is that the best available data, information, and knowledge is accessible to decision makers, practitioners, and the public. That's the core. That's the core of this target. And through a series of efforts, we'll be working towards ensuring that this happens. And compared to the previous targets, Aichi target I think 19 talked about ensuring that by 2020 knowledge, the science-based and technologies relating to biodiversity and its values, status and trends, and the consequences of this loss are improved and shared and transferred widely. So we already had Aichi Target 19 that had elements relating to ensuring that knowledge is widely shared and transferred. And there's also a related SDG target, latest SDG target 14A, which calls for increase in scientific knowledge and development of research capacity and transfer of marine technology, which specifically calls for increase in accessibility to scientific knowledge and development of research capacity. So there are already a number of building from the Aichi Target 19 going to Target 21. Already it's a transition that we are working towards as we move towards implementing the Global Biodiversity Framework. I will pause here. I think there's a technical problem. I don't know whether the slides are moving on your side. Looks like no. So just 1 minute. Apologies for the technical glitch we've just had. I think now we are ready to continue. So I was talking about Aichi Target 20 and Aichi Target 19 that had a component on ensuring that knowledge is widely shared and transferred. So I'll go to the next slide. And under biodiversity, the landscape is quite wide. There are so many players that are involved in knowledge management for biodiversity. Several initiatives and several tools have been developed by different organizations that are involved in the collection, curation, and sharing of biodiversity information and knowledge. So here I list some of them, but this is by no means anywhere close to listing the main ones. There are so many, starting with our own tools that we have under the CBD, the clearinghouse mechanism. And there's Infomia, which is a portal, UN portal for on multilateral environmental agreement. We have UNEP WCMC. We have the program managed by UNEP, the World Environment Situation Room, the UN Biodiversity Lab, IP-based Task Force on Knowledge Management. So they are all so many of them. And what we are working on at the Secretariat is to map all these key different knowledge management initiatives related to biodiversity so that we can start working together in more a coherent way. And under the Global Knowledge Support Service for Biodiversity, which I mentioned earlier, we are working with them on a similar process to sort of map all the key players that are involved in knowledge management for biodiversity so that we can align our efforts and support the parties. For as again, part of the background, the 5th Global Biodiversity Outlook GBO5 that was issued, I think, 2 years ago, noted that there had been progress made in the generation and sharing of biodiversity data, information and knowledge. And this was contribution to this was with the development of digital technologies that are making knowledge management easier for us, being able to aggregate big data, and technologies allowing us to do modeling and using artificial intelligence. All these have opened up opportunities for knowledge management. However, the GBO5 noted that there are some imbalances remaining geographically. Some parts of the world still don't have access to the level of knowledge and information available out there, and also in terms of the thematic coverage of the information available is also there's some imbalances. So this digital divide remains, but I think there's a lot of effort and progress is being made to narrow this divide, and we need to work towards ensuring that we make full use of the biodiversity data, information, and knowledge available to be able to for all countries to be able to make their own decisions and policies. So the COP was meant to be adopting a knowledge management component at the last meeting of the COP, but unfortunately, because the agenda was so heavy, this was postponed to the next COP. So at the next COP, COP16, parties will be adopting a knowledge management component of the GBF. However, just to give and we are already working on further improving this component as requested by the COP. And at the next SBI meeting next year, this will be presented and further discussed and finally recommended to COP16 for adoption. And this component will have different aspects, including strategies to enhance biodiversity knowledge management, all the stages from knowledge creation and generation to knowledge discovery and collection, to organization of the knowledge and sharing this knowledge once it's acquired, and ensuring that there's uptake and use of this knowledge. And I need to emphasize this, aspect of the component. There's a lot of data, information, and knowledge out there, but the challenge is how do we package these and make it available to the decision makers, to the implementers on the ground, to the general public, so that all this data being collected can be used and maximized. So this component will emphasize that aspect, making sure that we maximize the available data, information, and knowledge to support the biodiversity management efforts. And of course, the last component will be undertaking audits of where we are at, and where the gaps are, and what more we need to do. And then the cycle continues. So some of the key observations we've made as secretary so far is, of course, well, it's all obvious that knowledge management is going to underpin, is one of the key means of implementation that will underpin the successful implementation of the GBF goals and targets. And as already specified in the target 21, easy and timely access to this information it will be very critical for planning, for planners and decision makers, and also for implementers on the ground. And significant biodiversity data information exists, but these are often not accessible to all. So the issue of accessibility is what we need to work towards, and also strengthening the capacity of the different players and stakeholders, and to maximize and use this data. And I think this is where the Global Knowledge Support Service will come in handy to assist those countries that need support to be able to utilize the data, information, and knowledge existing on different from different sources. Also, we need to facilitate, I think this is the last point I've just highlighted here, in facilitating the discovery and accessibility. Using the technologies that are out there, I think now with the digital technologies, discovery of existing data, information, and knowledge has been made much easier. And also, we need to leverage existing and biodiversity knowledge management initiatives and in networks. There, as I mentioned earlier, there are quite a number. We just need to see how we can leverage all these and make this accessible to all parties to address their challenges. We also need to identify and address factors that are preventing full access and usage of this knowledge. And we are working with Andreas, who will be talking more about what his organization is doing. But we are identifying already a number of other players in knowledge management that are not necessarily within the biodiversity realm, but in other sectors, in agriculture, in climate change, and other knowledge management initiatives that would interface with knowledge management and for biodiversity to have a full package of knowledge assets that we can use to support implementation of the GBF. So this webinar series basically was motivated by everything I've just outlined above. So we wanted to first have this initial sharing of experiences, picking out on some of those partners I've highlighted above to share their knowledge, but also inviting parties that have done good work already on developing their knowledge systems for biodiversity to share their experiences. So this will be, as I said, this is the first in the series. There will be a series of other webinars that will come along the way. I think the first one has 10 webinars that will run every week. But the key thing is what motivated us to make sure that knowledge needs managed professionally across the organization. So we're hearing how different organizations have managed their information. We need qualified knowledge managers. I think Andreas will talk about this a little more in his presentation, but we need to do knowledge management in a way that is not quick and dirty or just trying it out. We need to be knowing what we are doing. And within this series and within the next program that I'm going to be talking about, we'll be working towards at least developing a core cadre of knowledge managers within the CBD community, and we'll be organizing as part of the knowledge management initiative, knowledge management for biodiversity initiative, concrete training programs that would enable us to know the key concepts and practices and good best practices out there. We need to identify solutions to our knowledge gap challenges, and this has to be done country by country. Every country needs to analyze its knowledge gaps, and try to identify solutions that fit the specific situation. The situation in say Palau, the knowledge situation there will be different from, say, the knowledge situation in a developed country like the United Kingdom, you know. So you can't compare apples and oranges. We are different levels, and every country will need to analyze this situation, and we identify what the challenges are and develop adaptive solutions. So this is where we'll be working with partners through the knowledge management initiative. And I think Andreas will do more justice to this picture or this graphic that you see, which describes the different aspects that we'll need to look into. it has to be systematic. Knowledge management has to be systematic. It goes through certain steps, and it's not ad hoc that you jump from this and do this and this way. I think we want to do it in a very systematic way. So we have we are setting out a systematic program that will follow to support you and all the stakeholders in implementing the GBF. We have there is a schedule for the first series, this first series of webinars, which you can find at this link I've just sharing on the screen. So you can find all the upcoming webinars, at least for this first series. Then next year we will launch another series, and we'll bring in more partners to share their experiences. So please check up this link and keep monitoring to see any new developments that will come along the way. And I'm going to talk briefly about now the KM4B initiative, and basically it's a joint program that is run by the CBD Secretariat, the UNEP, the Knowledge for Biodiversity Partnership, which Andreas is going to talk about, and other partners that that have signed up to join the partnership. The GEF, the Global Environment Facility, has agreed to join us. The United Nations Development Program, UNDP, FAO, and others have indicated have already signed up to work with us to take this forward. And we'll start with the first set of activities focused on the national focal points of the CBD parties and of the protocols. And we will start with a series of online trainings, working together very closely with Andreas and his organization, and a team of faculty of different professionals who have been working on knowledge management for quite some time. I will share a glimpse of some of those that are already working with Andreas and others. So we'll organize a series of training sessions on different aspects, and at the end of the training, the online trainings, we are planning to organize what we are calling the knowledge management for biodiversity challenges. The first challenge was supposed to start this year, but because of funding challenges or funding problems, we had to postpone it until we are able to raise enough money. So basically, the challenge is kind of we'll organize them by region. So we'll have 4 or 5 regional challenges and knowledge management for biodiversity challenge, where we'll bring together the key players within the country, within the different countries in the region, to first of all share their situation, identify the key problems or challenges that are hindering knowledge management for biodiversity within the country. And then together within that space of time, try to co-create solutions that could help address these challenges within the region. Some of the problems are common across the countries within a region. And then we try during that KM4B challenge to find a collective solution and other solutions that each country can adapt. So, and then when participants will be guided on how to co-create their own knowledge for biodiversity policies, policy briefs, and also coming up with a concrete KM strategy for each country. That will be the ambition. We'll aim at making sure that those who attend these KM4B challenges will be able to, by the time they leave, to have an outline for their own KM strategy when they get back home to further develop. And through this series of the trainings, we aim at having a core group of practitioners trained, focal points or other those that will join across the world. So this will have a core group of I wouldn't say experts yet, but this is a core group of personnel that have gone through the rigors of all the knowledge management processes, the concepts, and they fully understand how to go about doing knowledge management for biodiversity. And this will form a kind of a community of practice. That is, that's in the long run, that's what we will be aiming at. So hopefully by the end of the cycle, we will have well, say 1,000, who knows, that real core KM4B experts that we can call upon. And so the CBD will facilitate the organization of these challenges together with the K4DP. That's Andreas, who will be talking about that a little more. Then I mentioned that I'll give you an overview of some of the faculty members that have been working with Andreas on other similar challenges, including the one on knowledge management for agricultural development. And so we have it's quite a wide and rich set of experts that are already working on knowledge management challenges for other sectors that will be drawing on to help us with the designing our knowledge management challenges for biodiversity. Next slide. So in terms of the timetable, we are hoping that if the funding comes through in good time, we'll start this towards the next year and organize a number of series of challenges in the first month of next year. And by the time we get to COP16, we should have finished all the regional challenges and compiled a report that will form part of the background documents that will feed into COP16. And this also helped to inform the KM, as I mentioned earlier, the KM component for the GBF. That is supposed to be considered by COP16. So we hope through these challenges, we'll gather more information right from the countries themselves in terms of defining what the problems are, what the challenges are, and the solutions that they will co-create. And these will be made available at COP16. So that's it. And we'll be glad to answer questions and provide further clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Erie, for this very comprehensive and informative presentation that has provided a very useful context for the knowledge management for biodiversity series and for the initiative itself. I would also like to apologize to all the participants for the slight glitch that we had faced earlier. And I didn't realize that we had also invited Mr. Murphy in this meeting. So with this, now I hand over the floor to Mr. Andreas to address the second topic of the day, which is leveraging knowledge management to support the implementation of Global Biodiversity Framework, goals and targets, and the Sustainable Development Goals. So Professor Andreas, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Abhinav, for this kind introduction, and Erie for the wonderful presentation, Frederick for convening this webinar series. I'm very honored to collaborate with you on this very important topic of knowledge management for biodiversity. Dear participants, a good day to all of you, wherever you are in the world. I look forward to collaborating with you. I'm happy and honored to share some of my insights with you. I am Andreas Brandner, Executive Director of the Knowledge for Development Partnership, which is a global NGO linking knowledge management with the Sustainable Development Goals. And I will speak only briefly about it. but I'll speak more about the topic of knowledge management for development in the context of SDGs and the Global Biodiversity Framework. The subject of my presentation is, first of all, to introduce a bit the topic of knowledge management and knowledge. I have also been requested to provide some very foundational introductions of knowledge management, so to clarify what we are talking about when we talk about knowledge, when we talk about knowledge management, which basic concepts are there existing. Next, I will introduce also the biodiversity initiative, but very briefly only because Erie has done that very well. And I will also address the national knowledge management strategies as a topic because, as Erie mentioned rightly, global initiatives are important, but the solutions are then mostly on national or even local level, and we need to find solutions on the ground. So let me give you a brief introduction. Knowledge, I think that is widely agreed, is an essential resource for all societies all over the world. So it's not a matter of developing or developed or whatever. Knowledge is an important resource for any kind of thematic area. All the SDGs that I assume all of you are aware of require profound knowledge and a sustainable capacity to handle, use, apply, capture, and share knowledge. The Knowledge for Development Partnership is a multi-stakeholder partnership. So to say, we have governmental representatives and academic partners, business partners, NGOs, even many freelancers, artists, a very rich, wide community. Many students join us, and we really join forces to strengthen knowledge management in all the SDG areas. As you can see here, we have contributions and statements and collaboration with a global community. In 2017, when the partnership was launched at the UN office in Geneva, we built on all these contributions of, at that time, 150 authors, and we developed a global agenda knowledge for development, which provides a universal framework for knowledge management related to the SDGs. So to say, it's independent of a thematic area like biodiversity or water or agriculture. And without going through this in the very detail, you can download it on our website. Just highlight maybe some to give you a bit of an understanding what we're talking about. We have here 14 knowledge development goals addressing key challenges in knowledge ecosystems that provide the foundation for sustainable development. So those knowledge systems or societies, of course, need to be pluralistic, diverse, and inclusive. What is a knowledge society if we have only an elite to have access to knowledge? So we build on inclusiveness, diversity, and pluralism, because that will not only benefit all in the society, but we can also benefit from everybody in society through their contributions. Or the second one, people-focused knowledge societies. We really want to develop knowledge societies in which the citizens, the people can self-determine their lives and contribute competently to sustainable development. There is so much responsibility in the individual in contributing to biodiversity and to all the other goals by a responsible behavior. And that requires knowledge. Many people are not aware how their behavior impacts biodiversity, and they probably would contribute better if they knew better. So knowledge management and a societal approach to knowledge shall strengthen the citizens and everybody as an individual. However, individuals are always in a system, ecosystem, which includes institutions like universities, educational institutions, research organizations that provide data, NGOs, private and public bodies, and they form an ecosystem through multiple linkages. And these linkages are critical for benefiting the overall, let's say, system, because if academia does not link up with practice, then education and research may be sophisticated, working in the ivory tower and not benefit societal development, and so on. Knowledge partnerships are critical. Knowledge cities are typical and relevant hubs of knowledge, but not without rural-urban linkages. So there is a lot. I encourage you to have a look at it and benefit from it. It's, I think, a very nice work that we have done. K4DP, as an organization, has set up various activities supporting countries in developing national knowledge management strategies or knowledge agendas, facilitating knowledge partnerships, so to collaborate jointly towards a knowledge agenda, and transforming countries into knowledge societies. We are also facilitating sectoral knowledge management challenges like, as Erie mentioned, for instance, in agriculture, water, and very soon, hopefully, biodiversity. We aim to advance knowledge management in public and private organizations. Just recently, we have collaborated with the government of Uganda in launching its first knowledge management strategy, which I will briefly highlight at the end of my presentation. And there are other activities: fighting knowledge divide, strengthening knowledge hubs as a digital platform for knowledge sharing and use, etc. So you can have a look at this here. From my point of view, the multi-stakeholder approach is extremely critical. I mentioned already how important knowledge ecosystems are and the linkages between the various partners. It is obvious, and Erie has mentioned, that knowledge already has played a role in all institutions, and we have so many even knowledge management initiatives in the biodiversity sector. NGOs are, specifically in biodiversity, have been main drivers of awareness raising and promotion and data delivery, etc. So they are critical, and the governments, of course, are regulating education and science, provide solid evidence, and develop the next generation of experts. And then, of course, we have other sectors that have clear linkages to biodiversity: energy, water, agriculture. Those sectors impact biodiversity a lot, and we need to build these linkages. Then we have those various knowledge platforms in biodiversity, and knowledge management is a critical element in it. The businesses are extremely important contributors or enemies of biodiversity if they are not supportive. So a lot of loss in biodiversity is due to businesses which focus on profit and rather not on biodiversity. On the other side, businesses can contribute a lot to it. So, however, as long as we have those siloed approaches, we cannot really be satisfied with the success. What we therefore need is more collaboration in the sectors, joining forces, and addressing the knowledge management challenges in a sector, in a country, in a region, as you have mentioned, Erie, and finally globally, to say, what do we really need to know? What are the knowledge gaps? What are the overarching knowledge management challenges to protect biodiversity? And that will then finally enable us to develop a joint biodiversity knowledge agenda, in which maybe each partner plays a small but relevant role and can benefit from the overall agenda and can contribute well. So knowledge management is then based on knowledge. So what kind of knowledge are we managing here? Definitely, this is not the same as data or information. And I really love this, this cartoon, which indicates that the internet and those many platforms that we have, digital resources, they provide so much data. We are overwhelmed. We talk about information flood, that we are even struggling, the more information and data we have, to really understand what is critical, what do we need to know and what do we need to do. So the knowledge worker, as a governmental business person from whichever group, wants to have this kind of the glass of water to take a good decision and to act responsibly, and is mostly then confronted with overwhelming data resources. So one definition of knowledge is that knowledge is a living body of all these learnings and experiences, information that we as an individual or as an organization use and bundle in our daily life to create our own future. And I will deepen that understanding. It's not the same like data. Data is one component. Information are connected data in a context. And if then information is integrated into a wider context with people using it, then it really starts to create knowledge. And I will come to that point even more. What I want to say is that knowledge is not something that is put on a paper. Knowledge is a living process, a continuous process building on knowledge resources like information and data and experiences of others, etc. But it's a permanent activity that we apply to solve our problems and create a better future. And in that we use implicit knowledge, that is that we are even struggling to formulate. Tacit knowledge is another term that says it's almost like sleeping. We are not even aware that we know it. Whereas explicit knowledge is something that we may have put down in a document, in an article, in a database. It's very rational, it's objective, it's clear and theoretical, it can be shared on the internet, etc. Compare that probably with playing music. Of course, you need the music notes. Otherwise, you cannot play the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven or any other kind of music. You need to have this explicit knowledge. On the other side, without the capacity of musicians to play music, to read the music notes, maybe even coordinated with other musicians, conducted by someone in a room that has a good sound. So all that gives a symphony and good music. Both is needed, but let's not only focus on one, let's say the structuring and sharing of explicit knowledge. We also need the people who are using it. And we usually talk in the knowledge management community of three categories of knowledge. The knowledge that is in the people, human knowledge. That includes skills, qualifications, experiences, and so much more. But we have to consider that this knowledge is leaving the organization every evening and leaving communities and changing, moving to other places. So when we do not capture this knowledge timely, this knowledge might get lost. So it's, again, very fluid. The other component or category is the codified knowledge, which remains in the organizations or networks when those people leave. But we also have the external knowledge, which an organization uses on a regular basis without possessing it. So we are maybe using the relevant data that UNEP, the convention, that various institutions that have mentioned by Erie are providing, but these are not ours. But it's important that we know where they are. We can access them, we can use them, we work with them. So all these are important. Let's also keep in mind that knowledge is a construction in our mind. I just mentioned that we are bundling experiences and information, and this kind of bundling is a creative activity. So let's just imagine from birth to now, we have made a lot of experiences. On the first day, we see light, we see people smiling at us. Then when we are young, we touch the hot stove and we burn our fingers, and then we learn something in school and we get professional experiences. So we have billions of dots that we are connecting in a specific way. And the connection of the dots, that is a very interesting thing because it's a creative activity. And we may say these dots, they look like a house. And probably someone tells you this is a house. And once you see a house, then you believe this is the truth we are working with. And then when you are convinced that this is a house and new experiences and dots are popping up, then all of a sudden you try to relate the new experiences with the existing ones. And you don't challenge the existing experiences. You say, this is a tree, this may be a cloud or sun, or whatever. Whereas, probably if you would not have the house in mind, and you see now the new experiences, the new dots that are there, you may create a new picture of life and of our world. And that's how creativity plays an important role in changing mindsets. And that's why I even believe that art plays an important role in changing mindsets and stepping into a new understanding, also influencing our values and behaviors. Maybe that is rather a more biological approach, an animal, rather than a static house that we are dealing with. So whereas in previous times we may have had terms of security, safety, a house that protects us, we prioritize the world and we see it with different eyes, and we put nature more in the center. So I hope that you like these metaphors. Another, let's say, metaphor to understand knowledge is this ladder or steps to competitiveness or to impact. Whereas we see that symbols like, for instance, a cycle does not even have a meaning. A cycle is a cycle. So this can be a 0 or it can be an O. Only the syntax says that a cycle is either a 0 or an O. But then data with a meaning create information. Information that is in the context of an experienced person may create knowledge. Knowledge with the skills to apply something creates an ability. An ability with motivation can create action. If there is no motivation to protect biodiversity, why should I? I know it, I could do it, but I don't want. Maybe for financial reasons, I don't. But then if I take action, the critical question is, does it really make a change? So how good is my plan? Does it really finally, through its uniqueness and its quality, achieve the competitiveness or the impact that I want to achieve? And usually, as a strategic consultant, I would say, let's first of all think about what we want to achieve, and then define what steps need to be done. But on the other side, as a practitioner, I see that even structuring information and data better already helps to take action, no matter if that finally leads to a change, because it saves time very easily to say that. So now let's come to a definition of knowledge management. You see all these human codified resources, etc. There is a lot that is there. And knowledge management is now a targeted, integrated, and systematic approach. A systematic approach to what? To knowledge. And there are a number of processes which are critical in knowledge management, like finding, identifying knowledge. If knowledge is there, but I don't find it, it's hardly useful. But if I find it, but I cannot access it because it's too expensive, technical problems or distance, language barriers, then I still cannot benefit from it. So the access, the acquisition is critical. Creating new knowledge is important whenever we don't have solutions ready at hand. And when we have created, we want to share it. Hopefully, we will apply it, and whatever we applied and we learn from experience, we capture it so that we can then also benefit in the future. So knowledge management is a targeted, integrated, and systematic approach to identifying, acquiring, creating, sharing, applying, and capturing knowledge relevant to achieving specific objectives of the organization, or in the wider sense of our community, of our planet, of the initiative of the Compact of Conventional Biodiversity. This is another visualization of this definition. We have these two building blocks of targeted, systematic, and integrated. We define goals, then we implement that, and we assess if we have achieved it. And this is called the knowledge life cycle. So whenever this cycle is interrupted, we find something, but we cannot acquire. We create something, but we don't share it. We share it, but it's not applicable. So whenever there is a broken line, then our efforts are hampered. That's why integrated and systematic is important, so that our knowledge at the end of the day creates the value that we want to achieve. These are the theoretical background models for the biodiversity knowledge management framework that we have put together. Like in many other management frameworks, we have leadership and governance on the top, monitoring and evaluation, learning on the bottom, and a value chain approach in the center. So the life cycle elements that we have discussed will help us to create the human knowledge, the codified knowledge, and the relational knowledge that we need to provide knowledge services and products to all our stakeholders, qualify, provide the research foundation, the evidence, to convene, facilitate, catalyze, develop knowledge products that will help everybody to apply knowledge properly in the respective context. And then the application of all this should lead to organizational, sectoral development, including the development of knowledge ecosystems, and contribute finally to the Sustainable Development Goals. So biodiversity is our goal, and knowledge helps to achieve that, but we need knowledge also to develop this knowledge, and we need this knowledge life cycle to regularly avail, sustain, and share the knowledge. So that's the model. Erie has already talked about the biodiversity challenge, and what I would like to add to what has been said already is that it is so critical that the different layers in society are integrated. Let me start with probably the left building block here, the red one, knowledge theory, academic. You may say these academic. But if we are not talking about the same thing, if we are not really understanding well what is knowledge management, then we don't have a common language, we don't have common models and approaches, and we cannot really integrate. So we need a good, solid academic foundation when it comes to knowledge. Of course, we want to have a global understanding of knowledge for biodiversity. So this global initiative is critical. However, we need the national approaches as well. If the various countries do not strengthen their biodiversity knowledge ecosystems, then whatever the global level will do, we will fail on the national level. And I also say sectoral because national can include agriculture, water, biodiversity, and other topics. So we need this societal, let me say that, societal approach to knowledge. But all that will not be enough if we don't have organizational competence in knowledge management. So a global program, a national program can provide knowledge to organizations, but if the organizations themselves are not capable to maintain, sustain knowledge in their organization, then you train one person, the person leaves, the next day you start at zero. You provide knowledge documents, you provide data, but they are not accessible, they are not used, they are lost, so you start from scratch. We need competent knowledge management institutions, knowledge management in the ministries, in the NGOs, in the businesses, to really be adaptive to the knowledge that is provided and shared on a global level. And let's not forget that if the people are not competent in knowledge work, as for instance, to make use of digital platforms, to access data, to share knowledge in communities of practice, we will also fail. So that we need also trained, educated, and competent knowledge workers. And without this integration, we will not benefit as much as we could. And the knowledge management challenges really integrate these three levels. We educate at least focal points in various countries or in institutions. We help organizations to set up organizational KM strategies. We work on national or sectoral thematic knowledge policy briefs, and finally create a regional and global agenda. In 2021 and 2022, we have set up this knowledge management for agricultural development challenge, which is really a sister sector to biodiversity, I would say. And you can see here some sample outputs. And all the participants have been certified knowledge managers. So it's the individuals that benefit, the organizations, the countries, and the region as a whole, because we have developed the agricultural knowledge agenda in 2021, which includes 10 key aspects and which can hopefully provide a blueprint or at least a good reference to the biodiversity sector as well. So what has been presented by Erie really is a reference from the agricultural community. And while we are working together in the KM4 Biodiversity Challenge, we will hopefully further develop and specify this even more for biodiversity. However, let me say a few words. At the center of this agricultural challenge is the aspect of collaboration and targeted knowledge agendas. If we do not develop knowledge in a targeted, systematic way, then one partner will develop something, but it will not be used and applied by the other one. So we need collaboration, co-creation towards a common knowledge agenda. And that partnership requires professional facilitation. Second aspect in this agenda is inclusion. It is one of the very typical and let's say omnipresent topics. If we only strengthen those that are already knowledgeable, if we only include the knowledgeable in our processes, then only those one will benefit. How to set up an inclusive program is not so easy. We need to listen, and we need to provide a platform in which people are representing their various backgrounds and contexts. So only then we can create something that is applicable in these various sectors. The next topic that we have here is knowledge awareness. Because we will not invest enough attention and say inputs if we do not appreciate knowledge as a critical resource for biodiversity. And I would even like to provide an example in Uganda. I'm currently in Uganda, by the way, at Makerere University Business School, where we have established a Center for Knowledge for Development Center. Uganda has an incredibly rich biodiversity. It's wonderful to see the richness here in the country. And the people of Uganda enjoy the biodiversity, but they also see it as something that is there. the awareness of protecting it may not be as high as probably in other places where the biodiversity is not as strong as here. So we have planned to develop a knowledge center for biodiversity to create awareness, to highlight how rich the biodiversity here is, and by that to learn more and onboard the citizens. The fourth aspect that we have here is knowledge management excellence, and that specifically addresses KM in organizations. So we want to train, strengthen KM strategies, qualify knowledge managers, build platforms to strengthen that in the various countries. What we also need is national knowledge hubs and digitalization of our knowledge resources, because wherever face-to-face communication is not possible, we need these digital hubs. We need hubs to access information. And I'm convinced that as much as we enjoy the global platforms that we have, we also need knowledge hubs to facilitate collaboration and access to knowledge on a national level as well. Advanced knowledge processes, that includes processes, for instance, of capturing. How can we capture indigenous or local knowledge in the way of, say, protect biodiversity, but also agriculture and water? There are many practices in agriculture that are very friendly to environment and not using the industrialized approaches. So capturing knowledge, sharing it, disseminating knowledge to the public, how to use the media to join forces and disseminate knowledge. All these are critical factors. The next aspect here is academic centers for knowledge sciences. I truly believe that whatever we do on a global level is great, but will not be adequate and enough to develop and sustain the knowledge, skills, and knowledge management qualifications in the countries. We need institutions, universities, and vocational training institutes to research and educate the knowledge leaders of the future, specifically in thematic areas. So knowledge in biodiversity, knowledge management in agriculture. So we need this academic foundation in the countries, and hopefully they should also be connected with each other. Then business models and resource mobilization are critical so that the knowledge about biodiversity can also legitimately be applied by business people. Because as long as protecting biodiversity is heavily against the business interest, we will struggle. So we need to develop models where protecting the environment goes hand in hand with business development, and businesses can benefit from it. Then we have fighting fake news and providing quality information, so critical in any kind of sector. And finally, knowledge infrastructures and centers that provide on a local basis access to knowledge where personal interaction and communication is critical. I would not say that this must be the biodiversity agenda as well, but I think all of these aspects are critical also in biodiversity, and we can definitely benefit from these inputs that the agriculture people have developed. Let me also have a look at the time and move faster. As I said, art is important to envision a new understanding, and we have worked with artists to inspire the knowledge challenges. Erie talked about the challenges already. Let me conclude with the topic of national knowledge management. There are many countries already that have put knowledge management on the national agenda. As an Austrian in the center of Europe, I'm happy to say that this has been so long already on the agenda, and we have developed federal knowledge management strategies and agendas. Recently, we have developed in Uganda a very nice knowledge agenda that addresses altogether 21 topics on knowledge on citizen level, organizational level, and societal level. I think it's very inspiring. You will also find it on our website. And just a few weeks ago, 2 months ago, Uganda has also launched this knowledge management strategy. And here again, I would like to highlight that all ministries have been participating in this process, and knowledge management in the institutions of the ministries is, of course, a core component, but only the internal knowledge management internally in the ministries is not enough. As long as knowledge plays a vital role for biodiversity, for health, for agriculture, sectoral knowledge management is a responsibility of the public administration. So to say that public bodies are responsible to advance knowledge in the sector of biodiversity, and that requires a strategy. Then this altogether feeds into a national knowledge management strategy, but also needs to be linked with international partners, because no country can self-sustained, closed body of knowledge. And again, the knowledge spaces, physical spaces have their own pillar here in this strategy. Not only biodiversity, animal species need space, but also our human mind needs spaces. It also requires a process. A national knowledge agenda is not only a document or a strategic document, but it requires a process of strategizing, for instance, presenting such a strategy on a conference, including a high-level council, but then it needs to be implemented in smaller groups, in workshops, in sub-communities. But then you need to come together again and exchange experiences and progress. So it's like breathing. A knowledge agenda process is a process of widening your mind, getting a clear picture, and then implementing, doing, taking action. But then not getting stuck in the operational things, but then again coming together and widening the mind, expanding your views. And that requires professional facilitation. I can tell you, if you bring together so many people and institutions with different backgrounds, you need a professional facilitator. And CBD for sure is an amazing facilitator for this. And now we are just at the beginning of this journey of thinking, of strategizing, collaborating, and implementing. I hope it was not too theoretical, but I also said that some theoretical background is good to understand what we are talking about. In the next sessions and webinars, we will have more opportunities to hear from practitioners. So I hope that this gave a good starting point for our work. I look forward to your questions and the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Andreas, for your very pertinent insights and views on the topics. We would like to now open the floor for remarks and questions from participants. To all the participants, you can post your questions and remarks using the Q&A tab located at the bottom bar of the Zoom window. It is the third icon from the left in your Zoom window as you will take your mouse over it. You can post your question anonymously or under your own name. And we can already see that there are a few questions which have been posted already. So let me read them out. Our first question that was asked at 8:57 is, this is from Mr. Ahmed Birauk. What is the difference between data, information, and knowledge? Who would like to take this up? Erie?
Thank you. I can start, and of course, the professor with us here will give more details. So basically, there are these 4 levels. Here you mentioned 3, from data to information to knowledge, to wisdom. It's like a cascading process. So the data is at the lowest level. Really, this is the raw observations, the raw facts, the data. The figures, numeric figures, or quantitative, or so this is the really lowest, and this is usually not yet processed. It's just collected, and you have it with no meaning attached to it yet. It's just figures and facts. And once you started processing this and organizing it and structuring it and processing it, then it moves to the level of knowledge. I think a professor already gave this process as it goes up the ladder, and then once this the information organized and contextualized and has meaning, you start processing it into knowledge, which is basically refers to the know-how, the understanding, and the insight that one has. And as Professor Andreas has just mentioned, and this could be codified in a way that is in a form of a written guide or whatever, something that you can hold. So knowledge can be in your head, or it could be codified and put in a hard format, in say a book or a video or whatever asset. And then finally, the highest level, of course, that's the wisdom, the human intuition, and the basic understanding and insight that a person has. As we keep talking about this, where, for example, the indigenous knowledge comes in, where it's really it's wisdom. For me, it's at the level of wisdom, So, but I think that answers your question. So it's really a cascading level, and so you can't compare data, as Professor has already mentioned, to knowledge. These are two separate aspects. Of course, data eventually contributes to the knowledge, but when you're talking about data, you can't be talking about data and equating it to knowledge. So, Professor Andreas, maybe you can supplement that.
I think you have explained that very nicely. Mostly and typically, data are related to numbers like 1, 2, 3. But if you have a database and a lot of data on biodiversity, and you cannot interpret them well, then they are not of use to. Only if they are interpreted, then they provide you an information. But that does not mean that you can benefit from this information, or it is relevant for you. That is why the more contextualization you have, the more we reach the level of knowledge. And it's then, as Erie said, even more contextualized, then it comes wisdom and so on. So I think we have this. We can, I think, go to the next question.
Thank you, Erie, and thank you, Andreas. Our next question is from Mr. Alfonso Fofo from Burundi. And the question is directed to you, Andreas. The question is, can KM be taken into account when reviewing the next NBSAP aligned on GBF instead of producing a strategy as such? So, yeah.
I think I'll take up that. It's more within the CBD processes. So for those who don't know, the NBSAP is the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which is the broader kind of policy document at the country level that many countries are developing to guide their biodiversity actions. And I think, as you rightly said, it's better to integrate your knowledge management in the context of your NBSAP. Because then it links up with the other components. We have the capacity building component. We have the technical and scientific operation component. We have the resource mobilization component. So there are so many others that are part of the NBSAP. It's important that all this is considered within that context and not as a separate standalone strategy that is not directly linked. However, there might be merits because that's a complex policy document. You might not get the level of detail that you need for guiding your operational activities. So perhaps saying that everything will be within the NBSAP document, which is a policy document, might not work very well, that you have very kind of summarized, condensed information that is incorporated within the NBSAP. That in addition to that, you might need a more elaborated KM strategy that defines and spells out in concrete terms what you are going to do for knowledge management in your country. So I think having both, I would say, would be the best approach.
Yeah, maybe let me add to this, since I have been also asked directly. From my point of view, knowledge management should always be taken into account. And whenever you have an NBSAP, you can ask yourself, what is the role of knowledge management in it? You can have a national strategy, but still you can have a national knowledge agenda. And as I just mentioned, we highly recommend that countries should develop national knowledge partnerships and national knowledge management strategies as a whole. Because strengthening knowledge institutions, strengthening the knowledge ecosystem will not benefit only the biodiversity sector, but any sector. However, when we start in biodiversity and you have NBSAP, then why not convening a national biodiversity knowledge partnership and co-creating a knowledge agenda? So that knowledge management becomes a sectoral activity, and you coordinate and you commit your partners within the country to take the respective action to contribute to the knowledge biodiversity knowledge agenda within your country. As much as we will hopefully create a global biodiversity knowledge agenda, I'm convinced that also the regions and the countries should develop their biodiversity knowledge agendas. So knowledge management has to be a part and taken into account.
So I hope this answers the question from our participant. Our next question, which has been posted anonymously, is biodiversity KM seems challenging compared with climate change because BD is highly locally specific, both as regards individual species' lives and also around cultural assessment of the value of nature. Sometimes these definitions of values are mutually exclusive. For example, as with species ecosystems which are not necessarily economically useful as regards ecosystem services, etc., which is very different of evaluation to the idea of intrinsic value of the specific species, widely held by the IPs, etc. What creative and practical approaches do the CBD KM professionals take to squaring the circle to ensure different stakeholders, which includes donors, project beneficiaries, etc., are speaking the same language? I think that's the crux of the question. Is it possible to always integrate these very different approaches, or is it preferable to focus on areas with high pre-existing alignment? So who would like to take this up?
Yeah, Professor.
Yeah, I can make a first input to that. From a knowledge management point of view, I definitely say that in society, on the societal level, it is extremely important to link and align the various knowledge partners, as I say, academia, government, NGOs, you name it, because they have different languages, because they have different objectives. The business people want to make profit. The governments want to be re-elected. The academia wants a citation index. Although we are all human and want a better world, we also have our sectoral objectives, and they are very powerful. We also have our specific languages and approaches. And as long as we do not talk with each other, we will not understand why the others are working like this, and we will not be able to co-create something. So it's important and critical to understand why the others are talking like this. What are their objectives? What are their limitations and challenges? If we do not help each other, we will not achieve our goals. The scientists can say indicate say the threats as much as they want. If the solutions that are provided are conflicting with the profitability of the businesses, we will also always have the struggle. So we need to find solutions together and focus, saying, oh, this is difficult, let's focus on the consensus. That will limit the potential. And I would say the balancing of both is maybe the best way, to have some quick wins, do something that goes fast, but not forget the challenge of diversity in the dialogue. As much as we want biodiversity, we also need knowledge diversity.
Yeah. So thank you. I think that has been well answered, and yeah, we need to interlink all this, and I mean the goals and what every sector is aiming at might be different, but at the end of the day, the knowledge base and the knowledge sources could be integrated to inform the decision making. I think we are running out of time. We need to make sure that we respect the timing that we've set out. We lost a few minutes. I think we are going to just maybe use another 3 minutes. But since I have access to the Q&A, I'm just going to answer some of the questions directly instead of reading it fast and then we answer. So one of the other questions that have been directly to the CBD Secretariat is how we are going to work with the educational institutions to advance biodiversity knowledge management and data information and data collection. So this is exactly what the KM4B initiative is about, and the KM component for the GBF. These are some of the as I presented, it's part of the cycle that will be working towards. So we'll be working very closely with academic institutions, trying to leverage the data information and knowledge that has been acquired and accumulated by those institutions and making it available to you, the policymakers. That's what Target 21 calls for. So, and I think another question was from Sonia from the question was, how do we convince governments about the importance of KM, for example, in the Caribbean, where they have different ministries running traditional registries and physical file movement. I think many countries have now appreciated the importance of really actually having nationwide knowledge management strategies, integrating different information sources and the way the information is made available, and they have gone online or at least digital, so that you, when you go with the government service, you can be able to access key information happening in different ministries. Of course, we are coming from very far. I remember in my earlier career where we had registries and like files and files on top of each other, and finding one file to go and look for it was it would take you a whole day. But things have moved now with the digital technologies where this information can be made available online, and you can search it and find it easily. And with this, we can convince governments that this is a way to go to make access to data and information and knowledge accessible easily is the way to go. Maybe you can ask the other questions. I think one for Andreas. I think, Andreas, you have the access to the Q&A, right?
Yes, I see a question from Robert Odonia with regards to knowledge inclusion. How can we factor in physically challenged persons globally? I think that requires definitely a lot of attention, and it is a matter of policy commitment and also committing resources to availing knowledge in such a way that also physically challenged people can access them. Some people, blind people, there are ways. It's maybe not as easy, and it requires additional translation into the specific language, but it is possible. So I would say that this is really a matter of knowledge inclusion on a national level specifically. So to say that any country should define its, let's say, its strategies, how to avail knowledge to physically challenged persons in general. We cannot do this only for biodiversity. So how is, for instance, in TV, how are the news presented? Can some people listen to it or see the spoken? So that is the one. Then we have from John Locke, Frederick, considering the vast number of documents, is it critical we connect content in a paper or document continuously so to the local speaker of that knowledge, for example, developing new metadata structures? Yes, so definitely, I speak for Frederick probably. We need metadata that are even open to different languages and interpretations of terms. One quite good example for such metadata is Wikipedia, which defines terms and links it to different languages, so that in each language, even in local languages, we know that this thing is the same in different languages. But this metadata structure, we can also call it knowledge graph, needs to be developed, and if that is then applied as a meta structure over all the knowledge platforms in biodiversity, then any person in any kind of language and even with different wording and terms used can access the right information. So that would be our vision. Next. How IPRCs engage on KM and best way in right-based approach. Well, anybody can engage in KM. It's governments. The best entrance, by the way, is to have some kind of qualification first. When we work with governments, for instance, some in-house trainings, courses, workshops to sensitize how knowledge management can benefit operations and how the lack of knowledge management really hampers the organization every day. The understanding of or the appreciation of knowledge management usually comes very quickly. So education and awareness raising is critical in any kind of domain for any kind of stakeholder group.
Yes, we'll take the last, try to answer the last question so we finish in a minute. So one, just building on what we talked about with the IPOCs. Yeah, the target 21, as I already mentioned, already acknowledges that the IPOCs, the knowledge held by indigenous peoples and local communities would need to be taken into account for decision making, for planning, and deliberately parties and governments should do this. However, with the provision that as mentioned, that when this is done, it should be, this knowledge should only be accessed with the free prior informed consent. That's the only condition, the condition that was attached to this, and this is part of the practice within the CBD and international law, actually, with regard to accessing indigenous the knowledge held by knowledge, innovations and practices and technologies of indigenous peoples and local communities. But it should be taken into account in the decision making and utilized whenever consent is granted.
But I would also like to make them active contributors. Not only whoever is smart captures also the knowledge of indigenous people or local communities. I would like to engage them and to make them active contributors, to understand that they will understand themselves how the specific indigenous knowledge can play an active role, how they profile themselves as relevant knowledge contributors, how to provide this specific knowledge to others to be more relevant. Indigenous people are competent, active players in the knowledge ecosystem, and they need to understand and engage in a strategic way. Maybe some people have the understanding that indigenous people do not have the knowledge to participate actively in a knowledge society. I say this is not right. This is the wrong way. We need to onboard them and include them as any other stakeholder.
Yeah. So yeah, we need to close, unfortunately, because we need to respect the time, and apologies that we've gone over. Next time we'll try to keep on time. We start at 8 and finish at exactly 9:30. The few questions that have not been answered, but we'll answer them and send the questions. I mean, the answers to through the Q&A. We are going to compile the Q&A and make it available on our website. And so you are all welcome to the next webinar next week, and same time, Tuesday, this 12th of September at 8 a.m. Montreal time. And we'll have two presenters. One, the theme will be scaling up knowledge management to achieve the goals and targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And we'll have a presentation from UNEP WCMC and the EU on the role of the Global Knowledge Support Service for Biodiversity. And then we'll have another presentation on leveraging the experiences and lessons learned from knowledge management for agricultural development in Africa. Our friend Benjamin will be sharing what they have learned and what we can glean from their experience and integrate it into our own process. So thank you so much. We are so happy that many of you managed to join and you've stayed on until the end. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar next week. So until then, see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.